congratulations to our Employee of the Year." The applause crashed around me like waves as I stood up from my seat, smoothing down my dress with trembling hands. I'd spent 3 years at this firm working 16-hour days, sacrificing weekends, relationships, and sleep. This moment of recognition felt almost worth it. I walked toward the stage, heart pounding as camera flashes popped. The crystal trophy gleamed under the chandeliers of the grand ballroom. My boss, Hal, held it high, his wide smile revealing perfect teeth. 300 colleagues watched as I climbed the 3 steps to the platform. A round of applause for Tess. I reached for the trophy, fingers just brushing the cool crystal when Hal suddenly pulled it back. His smile vanished, like a light switching off. "Actually," he said, voice amplified by the microphone, "I've had second thoughts." The room went silent. My hand remained outstretched, frozen in the air between us. "This award," he continued, examining the trophy, "is meant to recognize excellence, dedication, and loyalty." He looked directly at me, eyes cold, not deception. Then, without warning, he dropped the trophy. The sound of shattering crystal exploded through the ballroom. Fragments scattered across the stage, some hitting my shoes. "This was meant for someone who actually deserves it," he said, voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried through the silent room. "Not someone who builds their success on stolen ideas." My chest tightened as if bands of steel were constricting around my lungs. 300 colleagues stared at me, mouths open, phones recording. 5 years of dedication reduced to broken glass at my feet. I stood there, unable to move, as whispers began rippling through the crowd. The humiliation burned through me like acid, but I refused to cry. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into my clutch purse and removed a sealed envelope. Without a word, I placed it on the podium in front of Hal, turned, and walked off the stage. My heels crunched over crystal fragments as I moved through the silent crowd toward the exit. Behind me, I heard the sound of tearing paper, then silence, then a crash. I didn't look back. Before I continue this story, if you're enjoying it so far, please hit the like button, drop a comment about what you think Hal might find in that envelope, and subscribe to hear more stories like this. I promise the ending will be worth it. My name is Tess Avila. Until 3 weeks ago, I was the lead research chemist at JDW Scientific. I specialized in developing protective coatings for historical artifacts, the invisible barriers between priceless treasures and the ravages of time and environment. I'd always been drawn to preservation, to protecting beautiful things from decay. The irony of what happened isn't lost on me. I grew up in a small apartment above my grandfather's watch repair shop. While other kids played video games, I watched him disassemble intricate mechanisms, learning precision and patience. "Time reveals truth," he would say, peering through his loupe at tiny gears. "All you need is to wait and observe." This philosophy served me well in chemistry, where reactions happen in their own time, revealing their secrets only to those patient enough to watch. I was patient, I observed, and what I observed at JDW would eventually change everything. My first 2 years at the company were unremarkable. I worked diligently, developing standard coatings for museum displays. Then came the Porter Museum crisis. Their entire collection of ancient textiles was showing signs of degradation despite supposedly state-of-the-art protection. They needed a solution fast, and our team was tasked with creating it. Hal assigned the project to his favorite researcher, Owen, giving him access to our best equipment and unlimited resources. I was told to assist, but not lead. "Owen has the experience for this," Hal explained when I questioned the decision. "Just support him however he needs." So I did. For weeks, I watched Owen test compound after compound, all failing to provide the balance of protection and visibility the textiles required. The museum was getting anxious, Hal was getting irritable, and I was getting an idea. Late one night, after everyone had left, I returned to the lab. I'd been thinking about a molecular structure that might work, a compound that would create an oxygen barrier without affecting light penetration. It wasn't in our standard protocols, but I knew the chemistry was sound. I worked through the night, testing my theory on sample fabrics, documenting every step in my personal notebook, rather than the company's digital system. By morning, I had a promising result. Not perfect, but significantly better than anything Owen had produced. I should have gone directly to Hal. That would have been the proper protocol. Instead, I approached Owen first, hoping for collaboration. "This is interesting," he said, examining my samples. "Mind if I run some tests?" I handed over my work, explaining my process. He seemed enthusiastic, asking thoughtful questions. For the first time since joining JDW, I felt valued for my mind rather than just my ability to follow orders. The next morning, Owen was in Hal's office when I arrived. Both men looked up as I entered the lab, then quickly looked away. By afternoon, the announcement came. Owen had made a breakthrough on the Porter Museum project. My contribution wasn't mentioned. When I confronted Owen privately, his response chilled me. "Look, Tess, this is just how things work. Hal needs this win for the investors. I need it for my promotion. You'll get other chances." "But it's my formula," I insisted. He shrugged. "It's the company's formula. We all work toward the same goal." I approached Hal next, trying to calmly explain that while I was happy for the project's success, my contribution should be acknowledged. His response was less diplomatic than Owen's. "Are you suggesting Owen took credit for your work?" His tone made it clear which side he stood on. "That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof this was solely your development?" I didn't. Not the kind he meant. My work had been done after hours, documented only in my personal notebook, which Owen had conveniently never returned. "I thought not," Hal said when I hesitated. "Tess, you're a valuable member of the team, but these petty jealousies are beneath you. Owen has been developing this line of research for months. If there are similarities to something you were thinking about, perhaps you overheard his process and internalized it." The implication that I had somehow stolen Owen's ideas rather than the reverse left me speechless. In the months that followed, the Porter Museum coding was a tremendous success. Owen received a promotion and his own research team. Hal received accolades from the board, and I received a lesson in corporate politics I wouldn't forget. I considered quitting, but jobs in specialized conservation chemistry were scarce. Instead, I changed my approach. I became more guarded with my ideas, documenting everything meticulously in ways that couldn't be easily appropriated. I created backups of my work, storing them away from company servers, and I watched. I observed how Hal operated, how he selected favorites, how he built his reputation on other people's innovations. I wasn't the first researcher he'd exploited, but I was determined to be the last. The opportunity came unexpectedly with the National Gallery contract. They needed a new display system for their Renaissance paintings collection, one that would prevent the subtle yellowing that occurred with standard protective coatings. It was the largest contract in JDW's history, and Hal was determined to secure it. "This could transform our company," he announced in the all-hands meeting. "I need everyone's best work. The researcher who develops a successful solution will not only lead the implementation team, but will be recognized as our Employee of the Year." The timing was perfect. For the past year, I had been working on a side project, a molecular structure that created an invisible barrier with superior UV protection while remaining completely clear over time. It was nearly ready for testing. Rather than working in the JDW lab, I rented time at a university research facility across town, paying from my savings. There, I perfected my formula, documenting every step with witnessed lab notes, timestamps from the university's system, and video recordings of my process. Meanwhile, at JDW, I worked on a different approach, one that was innovative but not revolutionary. It was good enough to keep Hal interested, but not so impressive that he would be tempted to claim it as his own before I was ready. "How's progress?" he would ask, hovering near my station more frequently as the deadline approached. "Promising," I'd answer. "I'm testing variations of a polymer blend that shows potential." He'd nod, eyes scanning my workspace. "Keep me updated." I noticed him paying particular attention to my lab notebook, the decoy one, I left prominently on my desk. The real documentation was never brought to JDW. 2 weeks before the National Gallery presentation, I arrived early to find my workstation had been disturbed. Files were slightly rearranged, equipment positions shifted. My decoy notebook had been moved about an inch from its usual position. The security cameras in the lab had mysteriously malfunctioned that night. That evening, Hal called me into his office. "Tess, I've been reviewing everyone's progress on the National Gallery project." He leaned forward, hands clasped on his desk. "Your approach is interesting, but I'm concerned it won't meet their specifications." "I understand your concerns," I replied carefully, "but I believe the final results will speak for themselves." He studied me for a moment. "You seem very confident." "I am." What happened next confirmed everything. The next morning, Hal announced he would personally oversee the final development phase of the National Gallery proposal. He installed himself in the main lab, reviewing everyone's research, paying special attention to mine. 3 days later, he called another company meeting. After reviewing all approaches, I've decided to pursue a new direction for the National Gallery proposal, he announced. Based on some preliminary work by various team members, I've developed an enhanced polymer structure that should solve the yellowing issue completely. The formula he outlined was a simplified version of my actual innovation, clearly based on glimpses he'd seen in my decoy notebook, but missing the crucial molecular alignment that made my true solution effective. I'll be leading the presentation to the National Gallery personally, he concluded, and I'm pleased to announce that our Employee of the Year will be revealed at the company gala next month. I couldn't help but smile. The trap was set, and Hal had walked right into it. The real question was, what would I find in that envelope when I opened it after the gala? And would it be enough to finally expose Hal for what he really was? The gala was 3 weeks away, giving me time to prepare the final phase of my plan. I returned to the university lab that night and ran the comprehensive tests I needed to document the effectiveness of my true formula. The results exceeded even my expectations. A completely transparent coating that prevented UV degradation without any yellowing, even under accelerated aging tests. I compiled all my research, documentation, and test results into a comprehensive portfolio. Then I made 3 copies, one for myself, one for my lawyer, and one that would become the contents of that envelope. The night before the gala, I received a text from Kari, the head of HR. Congratulations in advance. Wear something nice tomorrow. So Hal had decided I would be his Employee of the Year after all. The pieces were falling perfectly into place. The gala was held at the Grand Ballroom downtown. I arrived early, watching colleagues filter in with their plus ones, all dressed in their finest. No one knew what was coming, not even me, really. I had set the stage, but how the play would unfold remained uncertain. Hal arrived fashionably late, wife on his arm, working the room like the corporate politician he was. He caught my eye across the crowd and raised his glass slightly. I nodded in return, the perfect picture of the loyal employee honored to be recognized. Dinner was served, speeches were made. Then came the moment. Hal took the stage, trophy in hand, and called my name. And you know what happened next? The shattered crystal, the public humiliation, the envelope. What you don't know is what happened after I walked out. I made it to my car before the first tears came, hot and angry. I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to feel the hurt, the rage, the indignity. Then I wiped my face, started the engine, and drove to the one place I knew I could think clearly, my grandfather's old shop. The space had been converted to a small apartment after he passed, but I'd kept his workbench in the corner. I sat at it now, feeling the worn wood under my fingers, hearing his voice in my head. Time reveals truth. My phone vibrated constantly, colleagues expressing shock, offering sympathy, asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. I turned it off. Whatever was happening back at the gala, I would learn about it soon enough. The next morning, I woke to 37 missed calls and twice as many messages. Most were from colleagues, but 6 were from Hal himself. Timestamps growing progressively later into the night, tone shifting from commanding to concerned to almost pleading. The final one, sent at 3:17 a.m., "We need to talk. Now." I didn't respond. Instead, I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit and drove to the office of Benjamin Reyes, the lawyer who had helped me prepare for this moment. "It's started," I told him when I was seated in his office. He nodded, pulling out a thick file. "And the envelope?" "Delivered as planned. Then we wait," he said, checking his watch. Based on the contents, I'd expect a call from their legal team by noon. He was wrong. The call came at 10:22 a.m. "Miss Avila," said a crisp female voice I didn't recognize. "This is Angela Witt, from the board of directors at JDW Scientific. We'd like to meet with you today." Not Hal, not company lawyers, the board itself. "Interesting. I'm afraid I'm unavailable today," I replied, following Benjamin's coaching. "Perhaps tomorrow afternoon?" "This is rather urgent, Miss Avila. So is my need to consult with counsel before any such meeting." A pause. "You've retained an attorney? Wouldn't you? In my position?" Another pause. "Tomorrow at 2 then. You and your counsel are invited to the boardroom." I agreed and ended the call, looking at Benjamin. That was unexpected. "No," he said thoughtfully. "Based on what you included in that envelope, it makes perfect sense. They're scrambling." The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I didn't go home. staying instead at a hotel where no one would think to look for me. My phone continued to explode with messages, most notably from Owen, whose texts shifted from confusion to panic as the day progressed. "What did you give him?" his final message read. "Hal's locked himself in his office. No one's seen him since last night." I didn't answer. At 1:45 the following day, Benjamin and I walked into JDW's headquarters. The receptionist's eyes widened when she saw me. "Miss Avila, they're waiting for you upstairs." The elevator ride to the top floor was silent. Benjamin reviewed notes on his tablet while I focused on controlling my breathing. This was the moment all my planning had led to, yet I felt strangely calm. The boardroom doors opened to reveal the entire 7-member board seated along one side of the massive table. Hal was notably absent. Angela Witt, a razor-sharp woman in her 60s, who rarely visited the research facilities, stood as we entered. "Miss Avila, thank you for coming." Her eyes flicked to Benjamin. "And you are?" "Benjamin Reyes, counsel for Miss Avila," he said, placing his briefcase on the table. "Before we begin, I'd like to clarify the purpose of this meeting." "Of course," Angela replied. "We're here to discuss the information Miss Avila provided regarding potential intellectual property violations and other concerns at JDW." Benjamin nodded. "And Mr. Beckman?" A tense silence followed. Finally, Angela spoke. "Mr. Beckman is currently on administrative leave pending our investigation." I tried not to show my surprise. "I believe I provided sufficient evidence for more than just an investigation," I said, finding my voice. "You certainly provided something," said Winston Gray, the oldest board member. "The question is whether your claims can be substantiated." Benjamin smiled thinly. "Every document in that envelope has been authenticated and witnessed. Every test result verified by independent laboratories. Every statement backed by evidence that would stand up in any court." "Including the financial discrepancies?" asked another board member. This was unexpected. I glanced at Benjamin, who seemed equally surprised but recovered quickly. "Miss Avila's primary concern was the theft of her intellectual property," he said carefully. "Any other issues you may have discovered through your own investigation are separate matters." Angela Witt leaned forward. "Miss Avila, let's be direct. Your envelope contained proof that Hal Beckman stole your formula for the National Gallery project. We don't dispute this. The university lab records and authenticated documentation are conclusive. What we're trying to understand is how you also happen to include bank transfer records showing irregular payments from Hal to the purchasing manager at the Porter Museum." My heart raced. This wasn't part of my plan. The envelope had contained only evidence of Hal's intellectual theft. My comprehensive research documentation, timestamps from the university lab, and a video of Hal removing my notebook from my workstation, captured by a tiny camera I'd hidden after noticing the disturbance. "I don't understand," I said honestly. "I included no such records." The board members exchanged glances. "The envelope you placed on the podium," Angela clarified. "It contained 2 sets of documents, your research authentication and," she hesitated, "what appears to be evidence of financial impropriety." Benjamin placed a hand on my arm, a signal to let him handle this. "May we see these financial records? My client has no knowledge of them." Angela nodded to her assistant, who distributed copies of several pages I'd never seen before. They showed transfers from an offshore account to a private bank in the name of someone called Drake Forster, who apparently worked as acquisitions manager at the Porter Museum. "These weren't in my envelope," I said, scanning the documents. "I only included evidence of my formula and proof that Hal took credit for my work." "Then how did they get there?" Winston asked pointedly. "I don't know," I admitted. "I sealed the envelope myself. No one else had access to it." "No one?" Angela pressed. "You're certain?" I started to confirm, then stopped, a memory flashing in my mind. The night before the gala, I'd left the sealed envelope in my desk drawer while I went to get coffee. When I returned, Owen had been standing near my desk, appearing startled by my return. "Owen," I said slowly. "Owen might have had access to my desk briefly the night before the gala." "Owen Palmer?" Angela asked sharply. "Your colleague who received credit for the Porter Museum formula?" I nodded, pieces suddenly connecting. Yes, he was promoted after the Porter project, given his own research team. He worked closely with Hal on all major accounts after that. Angela and Winston exchanged glances. "Mr. Palmer came to us this morning," Angela said carefully. "He expressed concerns about Mr. Beckman's business practices and offered his full cooperation with our investigation. How convenient, Benjamin commented dryly. Indeed, Angela replied, especially since our preliminary audit suggests Mr. Palmer was a signatory on one of the accounts in question. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He's trying to save himself by throwing Hal under the bus. And possibly implicating you in the process, Benjamin added quietly. These financial documents appearing in your envelope could suggest you were part of whatever scheme they were running. I felt a chill. My carefully constructed plan had somehow become entangled in something much larger and more dangerous. What had started as an effort to reclaim my stolen work had uncovered what appeared to be actual criminal activity. I know nothing about any financial impropriety, I stated firmly. My sole concern was the theft of my intellectual property. I can prove the development timeline of my formula and Hal's subsequent appropriation of it. We believe you, Angela said, surprising me. The timestamps on your research don't lie, and the university lab security system provides clear evidence of your independent work. What's more, the video of Hal taking your notebook is damning. Then why am I here? I asked. If you've already concluded my claims are valid, Winston cleared his throat. Because, Miss Avila, we find ourselves in a delicate situation. The National Gallery contract represents 30% of our projected revenue for the next fiscal year. That contract was secured based on a formula that, legally speaking, belongs to you, not JDW. Now I understood. They weren't concerned about justice. They were worried about their bottom line. Additionally, Angela continued, if news of potential financial impropriety were to become public, it could trigger investigations that would jeopardize all our major contracts. So what exactly are you proposing? Benjamin asked, his tone making it clear he anticipated an unsatisfactory answer. Angela leaned forward. We want to offer Miss Avila a settlement, full recognition as the inventor of the coding formula, a substantial financial package, and a senior position within the company, reporting directly to the board, not through normal management channels. And in exchange, I asked, though I already knew, discretion regarding all aspects of this situation, a unified public statement about leadership restructuring that preserves the company's reputation and, by extension, its contracts. Benjamin looked at me. My client will need to consider. No, I interrupted. I don't need to consider it. Angela's expression tightened. Miss Avila, I urge you to think carefully before declining. The offer is extremely generous. I didn't say I was declining, I clarified. But your offer is incomplete. The board members glanced at each other. I want my name as primary inventor on the patent, I said. I want compensation for the Porter Museum formula as well, the one Owen took credit for. I want a public acknowledgement of my contributions at the National Gallery contract announcement. And I want Hal Beckman and Owen Palmer removed completely from the company, not just restructured or reassigned. That's rather vindictive, isn't it? Winston commented. I met his gaze steadily. Is it vindictive to want thieves removed from positions where they can continue stealing? Is it vindictive to want recognition for years of my work? Would you consider it vindictive if your contributions were systematically attributed to someone else? Angela studied me for a long moment. Your terms regarding the patents and compensation are acceptable. The public acknowledgement can be arranged. As for Beckman and Palmer, the board has already decided their futures with JDW are untenable, though for reasons beyond just the theft of your intellectual property. I nodded slowly. Then we have an agreement, pending formal terms drafted by our respective legal teams. There's one more thing, Angela added. We'd like you to take over as director of research, effective immediately. The team needs leadership, and your credentials, both scientific and ethical, make you the obvious choice. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 days ago, I'd been publicly humiliated. My award literally shattered at my feet. Now I was being offered the position I'd worked toward for years. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt hollow. I'll consider the position, I said. But first, I'd like some time off. The past few days have been challenging. Angela agreed readily. The meeting concluded with handshakes and promises of paperwork to follow. As Benjamin and I rode the elevator down, he looked at me curiously. That went better than expected, he said. You got everything you wanted. Did I? I wasn't sure anymore what I had wanted when I placed that envelope on the podium. Vindication? Justice? Revenge? You don't seem satisfied, he observed. I'm not, I admitted. Something still doesn't add up. The lobby was nearly empty as we crossed toward the exit. Just before reaching the doors, a voice called my name. I turned to see Owen hurrying toward me, looking haggard and desperate. Tess, please, I need to explain. Benjamin stepped between us. My client has no interest in speaking with you. Owen's eyes darted between us. You don't understand. I was trying to help you. Those financial records were a clumsy attempt to save yourself by implicating me along with Hal. I finished. The board has already figured that out. No! His voice rose, drawing attention from the security guard near the entrance. Listen to me. Hal wasn't just stealing ideas. The money from the Porter Museum is something you should discuss with the authorities, Benjamin interrupted firmly. Not with someone you've already tried to frame. We moved toward the exit, but Owen grabbed my arm. Tess, he's dangerous. When he realizes what's happening, remove your hand, I said quietly. Now, he let go, stepping back as if burned. You think this is over, but it isn't. Hal has connections. He won't go down alone. We left him standing there, his warning following us out into the bright afternoon sunlight. Should we be concerned? Benjamin asked as we walked to his car. I considered this. I'm not sure. It could be another manipulation. Or, I trailed off, remembering Hal's face when he opened the envelope. Not just anger, but fear. I need to see those financial records again, I said suddenly. The ones that were in my envelope. I have copies, Benjamin replied, unlocking his car. But what are you looking for? I'm not sure yet, I admitted. But something about those transactions feels familiar. Back at Benjamin's office, we spread the documents across his conference table. The transactions showed regular payments from a shell company to Drake Forster at the Porter Museum over an 18-month period, coinciding exactly with the development and implementation of the protective coating I had created. What would Hal be paying the acquisitions manager for? I wondered aloud. Benjamin frowned. The obvious answer would be kickbacks for awarding the contract to JDW. But that doesn't explain Owen's panic or why he would put these documents in your envelope. I stared at the dates, my mind racing. Unless the payments weren't kickbacks. What if they were bribes to ignore something about the coating itself? Like what? I don't know, but I pulled out my phone, searching through old emails until I found what I was looking for. A news article from 6 months ago about the Porter Museum collection. Here, the museum announced a special additional restoration grant for their textile collection due to unexpected preservation challenges. This was just a year after our coating was applied. You think the coating failed? Benjamin asked. No, I said slowly as the pieces aligned in my mind. I think it was designed to fail. Why would Hal deliberately provide a defective product? Because JDW also owns Restoration Technical Services, I explained. They're separate companies on paper, but the same parent corporation. If artifacts protected by JDW's coating began deteriorating, who would get the lucrative restoration contract? Benjamin's eyes widened. That's diabolically clever. But how would Hal ensure the coating would fail? That's what I need to figure out, I said, gathering the papers. I need to get into the lab. 2 hours later, I stood in my old lab at JDW. As the newly appointed director of research, security had granted me access without question. The space was deserted. Most employees had been sent home following the morning's events. I logged into the system using my new credentials and accessed the Porter Museum project files. It took only 20 minutes to find what I was looking for. A seemingly innocuous modification to my original formula, made after Owen had taken credit for my work. The change was subtle, the substitution of one stabilizing compound for another that appeared equivalent in initial testing, but would degrade under museum lighting conditions over a period of 12 to 18 months. It was brilliant, in a terrible way. The coating would perform perfectly during testing and initial installation. Only after it had been applied to priceless artifacts and the warranty period had expired would the degradation become apparent. By then, emergency restoration would be the only option, restoration that would cost 3 times the original preservation work. I downloaded the files to my secure drive and called Benjamin. I found it, I said without preamble. Proof that Hal deliberately altered the formula to fail after installation. This wasn't just intellectual theft. It was fraud on a massive scale. This changes everything, Benjamin replied. The board needs to see this immediately. No, I said, an idea forming. Not yet. There's something I need to do first. The next morning, I walked into the National Gallery, carrying a portfolio case and my personal laptop. I'd called ahead, requesting an urgent meeting with their conservation director, explaining only that it concerned their pending contract with JDW. Dr. Irene Mayfield met me in her office, her expression guarded. Miss Avila, this is unexpected. Thank you for seeing me, I said, sitting across from her desk. I believe you're about to finalize a contract with JDW Scientific for a new preservation system for your Renaissance collection. She nodded cautiously. The board votes tomorrow. Why? I opened my laptop. Because I'm going to show you why that would be a catastrophic mistake. Over the next hour, I laid out everything. The original formula I had developed, Hal's theft of my work, and most importantly, the deliberate modification made to the Porter Museum coding that ensured its eventual failure. This is disturbing, Dr. Mayfield said when I finished. But why are you bringing this to me, rather than addressing it within your company? Because I believe in preservation above all else, I replied. These artifacts deserve protection from both environmental damage and corporate greed, and because I have an alternative to offer. I opened my portfolio case and removed a sample of glass coated with my true formula, the one I had developed independently at the university lab. This is the actual revolutionary coating JDW promised you, tested under accelerated aging conditions equivalent to 50 years of museum display. As you can see, there is zero yellowing or degradation. Dr. Mayfield examined the sample carefully. And you're offering this directly to us? Yes, through my new independent consultancy. I've already filed the patents in my name. I can provide the coating at 70% of JDW's quoted price, with guaranteed performance backed by independent laboratory certification. She looked at me for a long moment. You realize this will destroy JDW's standing in the preservation community. Only the corrupt aspects of it, I corrected. The researchers and technicians who do the actual work are blameless. In fact, I'll be looking to hire many of them once word gets out. Dr. Mayfield smiled slightly. I believe the Conservation Committee will want to hear your proposal before tomorrow's vote. 3 hours later, I walked out of the National Gallery with the preliminary agreement in hand. As I reached my car, my phone rang, Angela Witt's number flashing on the screen. Miss Avila, she said when I answered, her voice tight. We've just received a rather disturbing call from the National Gallery. Something about you offering them an independent contract? Yes, I confirmed calmly. I decided the director of research position wasn't for me after all. I prefer to work independently now. This is a violation of your non-compete clause, she said sharply. Actually, it isn't, I replied. My agreement with JDW pertained to the formulas I developed while employed there. This coding was developed independently, on my own time, with my own resources. The university lab records prove it. The board will view this as a hostile action. The board should view it as a wake-up call, I countered. I've discovered how Hal and Owen were planning to defraud the National Gallery the same way they did the Porter Museum. I have all the evidence, including the deliberately modified formula designed to fail after installation. Silence stretched over the line. When were you planning to share this information with us? She finally asked. I'm sharing it now. Check your email in 5 minutes. You'll find everything you need to salvage what's left of JDW's reputation. Though, I suggest starting with a thorough audit of Restoration Technical Services client list. I ended the call, feeling lighter than I had in years. As I drove away from the National Gallery, I thought about Hal's face when he shattered that crystal trophy. The contempt in his eyes, the absolute certainty of his power. I wondered what his expression looked like now, as his carefully constructed empire crumbled around him. As the prestigious institutions he'd courted turned away in disgust. As his corporate board discovered the full extent of his schemes. I hadn't just reclaimed my work or my reputation. I'd built something new, something honest, from the broken pieces he had left me with. The most fitting revenge wasn't destroying Hal Beckman. It was succeeding gloriously without him, preserving beautiful things while his legacy of deception disintegrated like the fraudulent coatings he had sold. My grandfather was right. Time does reveal truth. And sometimes, time gives you something even more valuable than revenge. The chance to rebuild on your own terms, creating something that can't be shattered by someone else's cruelty. If you've made it to the end of this story, I hope it resonated with you. Taking a stand against workplace injustice isn't easy, but sometimes it's necessary. If you enjoyed Tess's journey from betrayal to vindication, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about people who refuse to be defined by the worst thing that happened to them. Drop a comment about what you would have done in Tess's situation. Would you have confronted the situation head-on, or found another way to seek justice? Your support means everything, and I can't wait to share more stories with you soon.